Federal authorities are now facing mounting pressure as a rapidly expanding investigation begins to expose what officials describe as one of the most extensive cases of public fund abuse in recent state history. What started as scattered allegations has now evolved into federal probes, congressional subpoenas, mass indictments, and a growing list of criminal convictions. At the same time, whistleblowers from inside government institutions are coming forward in unprecedented numbers. Their testimonies paint a picture not of isolated mistakes, but of a system where warnings were allegedly ignored, oversight failed repeatedly, and billions of taxpayer dollars continued flowing despite clear red flags. The focus of this unfolding investigation is Minnesota, a state now under national scrutiny as evidence suggests widespread fraud across immigrant-linked welfare and childcare assistance programs. According to multiple whistleblowers, these abuses were not hidden. They say they were reported internally, documented repeatedly, and raised directly with senior officials long before federal agents ever became involved. Several whistleblowers have stated that they warned both Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison while the fraud was actively occurring. They claim that rather than being addressed, their concerns were dismissed, delayed, or met with retaliation. If these allegations are supported by documents and sworn testimony, legal analysts say the implications could be severe. What elevates this case beyond standard financial misconduct is the scale and destination of the funds involved. Investigators are examining claims that large sums of taxpayer money were transferred overseas, with some funds allegedly ending up in regions connected to known extremist organizations. That possibility has shifted the investigation from state mismanagement to a matter of federal and national security concern. Minnesota law is explicit. State employees are legally required to report suspected fraud, waste, or abuse. The current investigation is now centered on a critical question. If reports were made repeatedly, why did corrective action not follow? And who had the authority to stop the payments but failed to do so? Evidence suggests these warning signs were not subtle. Official records from the Minnesota Department of Human Services show repeated violations at childcare centers that continued receiving public funds. One such example is the Quality Learning Center daycare in downtown Minneapolis. Between 2019 and 2023, DHS inspectors documented 95 violations at this single facility. These violations included failure to keep hazardous materials away from children, missing medical records, lack of immunization documentation, and no emergency contact information for dozens of enrolled children. Despite these findings, the daycare continued operating under a conditional license and received nearly $8 million in taxpayer funding during that same period. Although its license was flagged due to safety concerns, payments continued uninterrupted. In 2024, the conditional status was eventually removed. When reporters visited the facility multiple times, they observed something troubling. During regular operating hours, the building appeared largely empty. On several visits, no children were seen, raising serious questions about enrollment claims and attendance reporting. State officials declined in-person interviews but acknowledged in a written statement that the facility had a poor safety record. Even so, they confirmed it remained eligible for public funding under existing administrative rules. Investigators now believe this case represents only a fraction of a much larger problem. Independent journalists have identified numerous childcare centers across Minnesota with similar patterns: millions in public funding, repeated regulatory violations, and little visible evidence of daily operations. In several instances, facilities licensed for dozens of children appeared closed during business hours. Others lacked staff presence or displayed minimal activity inconsistent with their reported enrollment numbers. Yet public funds continued flowing. These findings triggered national attention. Videos documenting empty facilities quickly went viral, prompting reactions from federal officials and lawmakers. Vice President J.D. Vance publicly described the Minnesota situation as a microcosm of broader immigration and welfare system failures. He argued that weak oversight creates incentives for abuse, allowing public funds to be misused while eroding trust among taxpayers. According to Vance, the system rewards exploitation while burdening communities that rely on legitimate services. As public scrutiny intensified, federal agencies escalated their response. The Department of Homeland Security confirmed that federal agents were deployed on the ground to conduct site visits, verify operations, and interview individuals connected to the programs under investigation. Simultaneously, the FBI and Department of Justice launched coordinated probes targeting financial transactions, program administrators, and intermediary organizations. Since January 2025, federal authorities report at least 78 indictments and 57 convictions tied to related fraud cases. Officials caution that these numbers are preliminary. Investigators believe additional prosecutions are likely as financial records are analyzed and whistleblower testimony is corroborated. Congress has also stepped in. The House Oversight Committee has expanded its inquiry and formally requested sworn testimony from state employees, local officials, and lawmakers. Subpoenas have been issued for emails, internal communications, and bank records. Committee leadership has stated that the goal is to trace how money moved, who authorized payments, and whether any officials knowingly allowed fraudulent activity to continue. Financial institutions may also be compelled to provide transaction histories to identify beneficiaries. Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer emphasized that whistleblowers will play a central role in the investigation. He noted that these individuals alleged they raised alarms for years while senior leadership failed to intervene. The committee also plans to question mayors and municipal officials across Minnesota, arguing that the financial impact extends beyond state agencies. Local governments have reportedly been forced to cut services as funds were drained from legitimate programs. As pressure builds, political implications are becoming impossible to ignore. Minnesota's 2022 Attorney General election was decided by a margin of less than 1%, approximately 21,000 votes. The state's immigrant population now exceeds 500,000 residents. Critics argue that policy failures tied to welfare and immigration oversight may have directly influenced electoral outcomes. They claim that ignoring fraud not only damages public finances, but also alters political dynamics. Supporters of the investigation say accountability is long overdue. They warn that if such large-scale abuse can occur unchecked in Minnesota, similar vulnerabilities may exist nationwide. And as investigators continue piecing together evidence, one reality is becoming increasingly clear. This case is no longer just about fraud. It is about whether government institutions are willing and able to police themselves when billions of public dollars are at stake. As the investigation moves deeper, attention is now shifting from individual facilities to the broader system that allowed this level of abuse to persist for years. Federal officials are no longer asking whether fraud occurred, but how deeply embedded it became within administrative structures. At the center of that question is accountability. Whistleblowers claim that reports were filed, concerns were escalated, and documentation existed long before federal agencies intervened. If true, investigators must now determine who received those reports and why action was delayed or denied. Legal experts note that failure to act on documented fraud can itself constitute misconduct. When public officials have statutory duties to respond and knowingly ignore evidence, they may face serious legal consequences. One of the most controversial elements of the case involves allegations that funds were diverted overseas. While investigators have not yet released full details, multiple sources confirm that international money transfers are under review. Some transactions allegedly involved regions linked to extremist activity. Federal authorities stress that these claims are still being verified. However, even the possibility has prompted heightened scrutiny from national security agencies. Financial intelligence units are now working alongside prosecutors to trace cross-border transfers. The House Oversight Committee has indicated that banks could play a crucial role in uncovering the full scope of the operation. Subpoenas for account records are expected to reveal how funds moved, who accessed them, and whether money laundering statutes were violated. At the same time, state leadership is facing mounting political pressure. Critics argue that it is implausible for senior officials to be unaware of programs distributing billions of dollars annually, especially when violations were repeatedly documented. Public commentary has intensified as footage of empty childcare centers continues circulating online. For many taxpayers, these images symbolize a broader breakdown of trust between citizens and government institutions. Supporters of stricter enforcement argue that welfare programs must be protected to ensure they serve those who genuinely need assistance. They warn that unchecked fraud undermines public support for social safety nets as a whole. Federal officials have emphasized that enforcement actions are accelerating. Additional indictments are expected as evidence is reviewed, and prosecutors have indicated that cooperation agreements with defendants may reveal further details. Meanwhile, whistleblowers say they remain concerned about retaliation. Lawmakers have called for enhanced protections to ensure individuals who come forward are shielded from professional consequences. As hearings approach, Minnesota officials may soon be required to testify under oath before Congress. These proceedings are expected to focus on decision-making timelines, internal communications, and whether political considerations influenced enforcement decisions. Analysts say the outcome of this investigation could set a national precedent. If accountability reaches senior levels, it may signal a shift toward stricter oversight nationwide. If not, critics fear it will reinforce perceptions that large-scale abuse carries few consequences. Ultimately, this case represents a defining moment. It tests whether systems designed to protect vulnerable populations can be safeguarded from exploitation. It also challenges leaders to demonstrate that public trust is more important than political convenience. As federal agents continue knocking on doors and investigators follow the money trail, the message from authorities is increasingly clear. This inquiry is far from over, and its conclusions could reshape how public assistance programs are monitored across the country. For Minnesota stands at the center of a national reckoning, one that may determine whether accountability prevails or whether warnings once again go unheard.